Anyway, welcome to Temple Bruer. This is a clearly certified organic vineyard. Has been. This was put into conversion in 1995. This piece of dirt that we're on is one of the worst on the property. It is a piece of was originally a hydrophobic mallee sand, a very ordinary piece of dirt. The block was cross-ripped down to about a metre before we planted it, and we cross-ripped it and then we line-ripped the rows with a wing ripper. The wings were about 500 millimetres wide. That's it.
Okay. So basically, whenever you're doing a soil pit, for those that have done soil workshops, you always take the side of the wall off before you start. Because anyone know why?
Smear marks on the back.
Yeah, because when it's dug with the backhoe, it smears all the layers together, and you find it hard to actually depict them properly. Did you say this was a mallee sand?
Yeah, well, on the top it was.
Yeah, the top bit is.
With a heavy clay underneath.
Yeah, very heavy. I'll just pick the layers from this side because with the light I can see them properly. So there is a layer there which comes across to about here on this side. Then we've got another one about through here, just at the base of these roots basically. It's the same all the way. A slight colour change here on this side.
Many roots down there, Noel?
Not really. There's barely any roots at depth. Yep. But I mean, yeah, the roots are pretty healthy up top.
But the roots they're going out a fair way into the mid-row.
Yeah.
They're going across. It's not like they've got a compaction zone here, they're turning around and going back in.
Yeah. That's the difference with the rainfall and whatnot. Like in the riverland, on drip, you know, the roots would all stop. Just on the edge of the wetted strip.
And where you
wheel
track
tracks.
is
that's
in
right.
compaction zone.
But here, because you've got, well, a lot of good cover crop, good nutrients out in the mid-row, and rainfall, the roots are able to spread out. Yeah, for sure. They're just not going down.
They don't need to go down.
If you want to mark the layers, Barry, whenever you're picking your layers, colours obviously are first choice for picking your layers. Sometimes you do it on the density of the layers by running the hammer down. I'll just lay some of this soil out for later. So anyone got any ideas why the roots may not have gone down past about 30?
You can probably run along the clay because they irrigate quite heavily compared to what we do in the Barossa, so they probably just got enough moisture there.
Do you know how much normally you put on, Dave, or Barry, a hectare average?
About 2 meg.
2 meg. So it's not a lot. A lot of it could be to, if there's a carbonate layer there, will have a bit to do with it. It might be the heavy clay and the carbonate, because, I mean, no plants like carbonate layers. Vines will go into a carbonate layer if they have to, but they don't like it. Olives will go down into it. Apricots, you know, the tougher type crops. Citrus, avocados, any of those crops won't touch it. Like, will not penetrate it at all.
What about in drought conditions when there's
No. And also the carbonate locks up your nutrients as well. I mean, you know, vines are growing in certain areas in the Coonawarra and Riverland around Marook and whatnot. They're in pure rock. You know, they're planted in rock. But if you have a look at those crops compared to other vineyards on deeper soils, they're real small canopies, not much vigour, but they get really good quality grapes off them, small bunches, you know, small berries. And why is that? Because they're struggling. They're under stress all the time in the carbonate. We normally say, if we would like doing the raws on this, Barry, we'd take our topsoil and our main root zone at 30, and then with a carbonate layer, we just add 20 centimetres just as a usable depth. Okay?
We're putting gypsum and lime out, would that feed much?
Gypsum and lime, nothing will alter a carbonate layer at all. There's no way, other than banking up to get a deeper topsoil. You can't get rid of it. You can't leach it, you can't do anything.
So heavily mulching would.
You can change the soil structure, improve it, but you're still going to have a carbonate layer. Yeah, it's a tricky one. All right, so we'll work up our moist bolus in one hand, and we're just ribbon it out. That's ribboning out quite well. It's nice dark colour. It's got about 80, 70. So then we have our texture chart. So if you're ever using these texture charts, what you firstly do is just look at the ribbon length. That'll give you a starting spot, and then you look at the description, because it could be up or down from the description one way or the other. So we go right down the list to, we've got, well, 50 to 75 mils or 75 to 85, so we're in that vicinity. So it could be a sandy clay or a light clay. So just we look at that description, we'll form a ribbon 50 to 75 mil, plastic bowler, slight resistance to shearing. If it's a sandy clay, you can see, feel, hear sand grains, which I definitely can. It's very sandy. Or a light clay is smooth to touch, more like plasticine. So even though it's spongy, it's not like plasticine. But if we went up the next layer to a light medium clay, plastic bowler, smooth to touch, moderate resistance to shearing, but it's not that, so it's definitely a sandy clay. Okay, because it's very sandy and it's ribboned out to a decent length. So we've got a SC there, Barry. Now sometimes the first couple of layers might actually be the same texture. It's just the colour difference is from the organic matter. So this one is a bit more crumbly already and a bit more solid. We know you're not going to be full-blown soil surveyors at the end of a couple of hours, but if you can tell the difference between your topsoils, you know, your sandy loams, your intermediate layers, light medium clays, all that sort of thing, then your clays, well, that's a good spot to start. This is definitely a bit heavier and a lot solider lumps in it. This one will ribbon out longer, it's just got a lot of lumps in it, a lot of very solid bits of clay. But still a nice, when it's wet up, it's still a nice dark brown colour. Hasn't got as much sand in it, it's a bit more, feels a bit more silty than sandy. I wouldn't call that a sandy clay, but it's the same ribbon length basically, so I would just call it a light clay. So it's in the same category, the same texture group, but it has not got as much sand in it.
What would you be down to in 25 mil and out to 8 inches? Or?
Oh, easy, yeah. In your mallee soils, all your topsoils will be only 10, 15 mil.
Like, won't do it.
Yeah, it's just because of sand grains, and you can't get a texture. You know, they're sands, loamy sands, and then, like generally in most mallee soils, you have your sands, loamy sands on top. Then you might get into a light sandy clay loam, generally a carbonate layer in most cases, and then quite often Blanchtown clay or a heavy clay underneath. So that's pretty typical of the highland mallee soils around the whole of South Australia. Langhorne Creek here has some, what can I say, bizarre soils, for want of a better word, because a lot of the soils have been mixed up over the years from a lot of floodplain areas out here, and silt and dirt being washed down from the hills onto the floodplain. Yeah, a lot of the soils are wind blowing, shifted around. All your hills and hills and swales, and it's all been shifted over here. This has got some carbonate lumps in it, rock.
David, do you want to comment a bit on the nutrient status of the soil?
I think there were some elements were very high. Potassium
is very high.
Phosphorus and something else.
Well, we never use any phosphorus fertiliser.
Yeah. So we're just ribbing this one out. It's going out.
Really ignorant. He's referring to hydrophobic mallee soil.
You don't know what that is? Well, I'm assuming like sort of gutless sands, non-wetting.
Non-wetting.
Yeah.
Non-wetting sands.
Yep.
They resist wetting.
Yep.
really we fixed that by just putting a lot of compost on, and these soils wet really well now.
We're getting out to probably 100 mil with a ribbon there, but if I hand that around, you'll feel a stark difference to what we had before. That's the second layer. It's sort of a reddy brown, but when you wet it up, it goes a bit darker.
So do you classify them wet rather than dry?
Yep. Oh well, when you wet it up to ribbon it, because the dryness will change the colour. And that's all pretty much the same all the way down. Has lightened up a bit right at the bottom, but it's still a clay. So,
It hasn't bleached at all.
so that's pretty much our 3 layers. So that last one, that would actually be a light medium clay, LMC. A heavy clay you can barely ribbon. It's so dense, like it's just solid as, like Blanchetown clay, all of those clays. Just hold water like a bottle and heavy as. A medium clay will, you can still ribbon out, but still very dense, whereas that's quite soft. So, yep.
So that basically these clays they'll hold a reasonable amount of water then.
Oh, they'll hold a lot of water, but it's harder to extract because it's held very tightly. So they're so dense. Thing is here, when I do your raws, the bulk of your roots are at 30 centimetres. So there's not much point watering past 30 centimetres, unless for a bit of leaching and stuff like that. But there's very few roots at depth.
The ones that are very small.
They are very fibrous, little tiny roots. Normally I would see deeper sort of tap roots going down. Because we're right next to a vine, so...
Originally the vines were on banks up to sort of like this level.
Yeah.
And we've just knocked, the banks have been removed.
So what we'll do, we'll just have a quick look at the carbonate reaction. So there's no reaction on the first soil, so it's nil, N for nil.
You say that's hydrochloric.
Yeah, diluted hydrochloric acid, 10 to 1. Nothing on the second layer. And we've got a bit happening here. It's not, like other than the chunks in there, we've got the chunks fizzing, which is the carbonate sort of rubble, but there's a little bit in the clay. You see it fizzing slightly down. So that's a bit of a hard one to call because you don't call it a carbonate layer unless you actually get a very strong reaction. So the chunks here, like the actual carbonate chunk, sure, that's a carbonate, class 3A or class 3B carbonate. But in the actual soil, it's only just a really slight fizz, so you wouldn't actually call it a carbonate layer. But for some reason, the roots don't like it, regardless. So there is a bit of carbonate in there. It's a fairly heavy clay. Could have some other chemical barrier in there, but you can see by looking at the profile, the roots are happy to about 30 until we hit that layer, and then really nothing.
Given that David said that he deep ripped to a metre,
Yep.
does that indicate then that it is a chemical type of thing, that seeing as there shouldn't have been a physical barrier?
Yeah, it's probably more a mixture of the carbonate and the heavy clay.
Yeah.
The plants are just happier on the top. And I mean, in any crops, the bulk of your roots are in the first 30 centimetres, especially on drippers. Because that wets first. All your nutrients are generally in the top layer. So
if this was out in the bare field with no vines, would you be able to still say there'll be a carbonate layer down at that 30 to 40 centimetre?
Yeah, that's here.
So if you like,
yeah.
So if you like, there was no vines here, you'd be able to say that's that amount of soil is what you're growing the vines in.
Pretty much. Yep. I mean, it does vary. I've done thousands of pits, and 75 metres apart, it can go from that to that. So that's why you really should go and do some reconnaissance pits before you plant up. number one to plant into your sort of roughly the same raws, so you can irrigate the same, and you can put the right varieties on the different depths, soil depths. And I guess all we're saying with the depth of roots is more of an irrigation thing. You know, why water down to 80 centimetres if it's only at 30? You know, it's just a way, you're washing all your nutrients away, everything, when the roots are all up here. So, alright.